On today's episode, I'll discuss whether the Chicago Blackhawks should break the bank for Mitch Marner.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and check me out on X at Jack Bushman too, but make sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. If you're watching on YouTube right now, make sure to go and hit that like button, hop in the comment section below, and to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, all of which is 100% free, won't cost you anything, and helps me out in a massive way in growing my platform. And one final shout out that I got to give goes out to today's sponsor, which is Monarch Money. Go and take control of your finances right now by using our code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off on your first year. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone out there had themselves just a lovely Memorial Day weekend. Back to business here on the podcast today, and opening things up on today's show. It's not another 2025 NHL Draft profile. That's something to be on the lookout for on tomorrow's episode. It's actually something that I hinted at late last week, which is the Mitch Marner debate, whether the Chicago Blackhawks should pursue pending unrestricted free agent forward Mitch Marner if he hits the market this summer. And that's the hot conversation that's been going on all across the hockey community, not only here in Chicago these last couple of weeks since the Toronto Maple Leafs got eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs once again, and honestly, even stemming back the last couple of years further than that, leading up to and projecting this summer's free agent class with Marner being one of the top names that could possibly be available. And that's now just the big question that looms over Mitch Marner and the Toronto Maple Leafs heads. Will Marner leave the Leafs organization? And based on his postseason presser being pretty non-committal, as well as kind of the rumors that we're hearing around the league, in addition to Shanahan now being out, it seems like a pretty good time for the Leafs to go and shake things up. I expect Mitch Marner to go and wind up hitting the free agent market. And before the Blackhawks, I get into whether I believe they should make a push for Marner here this summer if he should wind up hitting free agency. I first wanted to start with a breakdown of his NHL career leading up to this point. Marner is a 6-foot, 180-pound winger who actually turned 28 just a couple of weeks ago back on May 5th, and of course was selected 4th overall by his hometown team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, back in the 2015 NHL Draft, and he spent each of his 9 seasons in the NHL playing for the Leafs organization. And in 9 of those seasons, 5 of them, Mitch Marner has been at least a point per game player. He's registered 90 points 4 times, 100 points once, which actually occurred this season when he had a career best 75 assists to go along with 27 goals, giving him 102 points in 81 games. And overall, just looking at Marner's last couple of seasons to give us an idea of his greater body of work. In the 2023-2024 campaign, he had 26 goals along with 59 assists for 85 points in 69 games. Then the year prior, 2022-2023, 30 goals along with 69 assists, very nice, for 99 points in 80 games. And then the 2021-2022 season, he had a career best 35 goals in addition to 62 assists, giving him 97 points in 72 games worth of action. And now that he's 28 years old, he's in the prime, in the peak of his career, we obviously got a real good idea of what Mitch Marner is. And that's a consistent 90 to 100 plus point player, a guy who can also chip in and score somewhere between 25 and 35 goals. And he can also sneakily help you out on the penalty kill and plays a pretty responsible defensive game. He's quietly been voted top 14 in the Selke Trophy voting in his NHL career. And then diving deeper into his analytics, he's actually never had a season with a Corsi for percentage lower than 50% at even strength. And he's never had a season in which he was on the ice for more goals against than goals for at even strength as well. One of the best point producers in the NHL over the last half decade. Only 6 players have more points in that time span than Mitch Marner. One of the best overall playmakers as well. And like I outlined, he is someone who could play in both special teams departments and provides a pretty responsible defensive game. So that's obviously what would make him such an attractive player if he hits the free agent market here this summer. And not only are the Chicago Blackhawks obviously going to be interested, there's going to be a slew of teams that are going to be in the running for Mitch Marner if he becomes available. The only problem with this kid, it hasn't been in the regular season. It's been what's happened in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And honestly, if you just go and look at Mitch Marner's career postseason totals, in 82 games, he's accumulated 73 points. It's obviously not the point per game margin that you see from him regularly in the regular season, but still above 0.9 points per game. It's nothing to scoff or bat an eye at. However, you got to go and do a little bit deeper digging and go and see the lack of goal scoring that Marner has provided in the postseason, as well as the lack of contributions when the light has been the brightest, when the Toronto Maple Leafs have needed him to rise to the occasion the most, aka games 5, 6, and 7. Now, to be fair, Marner is not the only guy that deserves to have the finger pointed in his direction for the postseason play not being where Leafs fans and the Leafs organization needs it to be in order for them to advance on to the next round. But it's also, I don't think, as horrible as some other people make it out to be. But make no mistake about it, the goal scoring, I think, is the biggest problem with Mitch Marner in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Out of his 73 points that he has in 82 playoff games, he's only scored 14 goals. Think about that. 14 goals in 82, a full season's body of work in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he only has 14 goals. This is a guy who regularly scores somewhere in the high 20s. Shoot, back in 2021, 2022, he was a 35 goal scorer for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And in that postseason and 7 playoff games, he only had 2 goals. And looking at this year's production for him in the Stanley Cup playoffs, he did have 13 points in 13 games, but he only scored 2 goals. And then there were also the problems in game 5 and 6, which has been everlasting for quite some time now. And then even looking at his 23-24 playoff production, he only had 3 points, 1 goal, and 2 assists in 7 postseason games. The 2022-23 postseason is probably where he fared the best, as he had 14 points in 11 games total. But he only scored 3 goals in that postseason run as well. So that's kind of the critique over Mitch Marner. The production isn't what it is in the regular season, and the goal scoring assuredly goes dry when his team really needs that to be brought out the most, as well as him lacking some size, doesn't necessarily have the physicality that I think people want players to have come Stanley Cup playoff time. And then just again, the lack of production under pressure. Those are the criticisms that most people have for Mitch Marner. But other than that, and I know that's obviously pretty hefty, he's still obviously going to be paid as one of the highest paid players in the league, whether you agree with it or not, because in the regular season, he's proved to be one of the best point producers in the entire NHL. As far as what this will lead to Marner getting in free agency, should he wind up hitting the market in terms of dollar amount, that's what I'll be talking about here in just a second in segment 2, Blackhawks fans, as well as whether the Hawks should be gearing up to break the bank and make a run at Mitch Marner here this summer. Make sure to stick with me here for segment 2. Real quick though, first, I do got to talk to you all about Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's real easy to lose track these days, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you complete visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch isn't just a budgeting app, It's a complete financial command center so that you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place and stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. And what I personally love about Monarch is that instead of juggling multiple financial apps at the same point in time, you can just use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. So go and take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money and use our code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps at monarchmoney.com and you'll get 50% off on your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com with our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for half off on your first year. Segment 2, picking up the conversation where I left off on Mitch Marner and getting into what kind of contract he could be looking at this summer should he hit the free agent market, which, as I broke down, fully is the expectation at this point in time. We know that the NHL salary cap is not only going to be rising for the upcoming season, it's going to be rising exponentially the next couple of years. It's going to be going up from $88 million, which is what it was this year, to $95.5 million for the 2025-2026 season. And then it's actually going to get all the way up to $113.5 million for the 2027-2028 campaign. And because of that, we are going to see lots more lucrative contracts given out in free agency. And we've already seen kind of an effect of the salary cap expecting are now officially going up these next couple of years. And Leon Draisaitl's contract that makes him the highest paid player in the NHL, as well as what Mikko Rantanen just signed for with the Dallas Stars. And Mitch Marner, as I broke down, regardless of how you feel about him in the Stanley Cup playoffs and whether the Blackhawks should go and make a run at him, whatever it may be, there have only been 5 players over the last half decade who have put up more points than Mitch Marner during that run. And they're all among the highest paid players in the NHL. That's where Mitch Marner is going to be when he signs his next contract. But to get an idea of what that number could be for Marner, let's go and take a look at the 6 richest contracts in the NHL right here, right now. Number 1, Leon Draisaitl, as I just mentioned, has a $14 million AAV, making him the highest paid player in hockey. Right behind him is Austin Matthews, likely Mitch Marner's former teammate, with a $13.25 million AAV. Nathan MacKinnon for the Colorado Avalanche is third with a $12.6 million AAV. Connor McDavid, believe it or not, is fourth with a $12.5 million AAV. But when his contract comes up in a couple of years, you can expect it's going to be higher than Leon's at $14 million. But then we have Mikko Rantanen with the Dallas Stars at $12 million flat. And then Artemi Panarin next up behind him for the New York Rangers with an $11.64 million AAV. Mitch Marner, honestly, with the way the salary cap is going up in the NHL, I don't know if he's quite going to get Leon Draisaitl $14 million per. I wouldn't be surprised if he does, just considering there's going to be so many suitors. It probably is going to be a highest bidder type of situation. I wouldn't be surprised if Mitch Marner does wind up getting over $14 million. If I had to guess right here, right now, I'd ballpark somewhere between 13 and 13.5. I'm guessing he's going to be breaking his good buddy Austin Matthews for the second highest paid contract in the NHL. And I definitely think he's going to get more than Nathan MacKinnon at $12.6 million. So probably looking at Mitch Marner as either the highest or second highest, likely at least top 3 highest paid players in the NHL into the 2025-2026 season. Should the Chicago Blackhawks be willing to give him that type of money to come and play on the top line long-term with Connor Bedard? My opinion on it, Blackhawks fans, Mitch Marner definitely deserves more, not as much flack as he gets in the media, because he truly is one of the best playmakers and point producers in all of the league. And along with Connor Bedard, it would be a lot of fun to watch those two run wild on the Blackhawks top line. My problem is, for a guy who's already 28 years old, this is likely going to be a $7 to $8 million deal at least $13 million. If I had to guess, this is not only a guy who you're wanting to help steer and turn around this direction of the Blackhawks offense and will be a focal point along with Connor Bedard. You're also relying on him to be a driving force of your team once that Stanley Cup competitive window opens up once again for the Blackhawks. And for Mitch Marner to be the driving piece of that, I know the salary cap is going to be going up, and the Blackhawks are going to have the salary cap to afford lots of different players along with Mitch Marner. I just think the juice, in my opinion, isn't worth the squeeze at that price tag for a guy who doesn't provide the physicality that you want to have for a top-line player in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Blackhawks are a team that doesn't have a lot of size already in their skill players, and he just hasn't produced how you want him to when the lights are the brightest. And it's not like he's 23, 24 years old. He needed to be better these last couple of Stanley Cup playoffs for the Maple Leafs, particularly in those big games in the second round against the Florida Panthers, and he came up empty. And I don't think that should fully dictate the decision over whether the Blackhawks should get him or not. But I went into this year's Stanley Cup playoffs saying Mitch Marner has to wow me in order for me to want the Blackhawks to give him top money in the market to make him right among the highest paid player in the NHL. And he just didn't move that needle enough for me personally. Let me know in the comment section below, Blackhawks fans, if you feel the same type of way about Mitch Marner, or if you think that would be a mistake for Blackhawks GM KD to let Mitch Marner go by free in the offseason and not make a run at him. For what it's worth, we've gotten a little bit of a whisper from Scott Powers of The Athletic on the Blackhawks and possibly their mindset around Mitch Marner here this summer from his podcast with Mark Lazarus. As a reminder, again, if you're not already following Mark Lazarus and Scott Powers on social media, you're doing yourself a disservice as a Blackhawks fan. But very interesting to hear Scott Powers say recently that, quote, "From every indication I have, the Blackhawks aren't going to go after Mitch Marner, and they've already made up their mind," close quote. Again, I just personally think the juice isn't worth the squeeze to give Mitch Marner that type of money, but it's not like I'd be mad about it if the Blackhawks did. I would certainly understand. I just have some concerns because giving out that type of contract with that term that likely would come with it, it's someone that you would expect to be a driving force for your team come Stanley Cup playoff time. And I just haven't seen enough from Mitch Marner to feel comfortable enough to give him that type of money. Again, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. But according to Scott Powers, sounds like the Blackhawks necessarily didn't get the needle moved either from what they saw by Mitch Marner in the Stanley Cup playoffs. One other thing I wanted to mention here on the show, since we're on the topic of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and this is, of course, the Chicago Blackhawks podcast, with the Maple Leafs being knocked out in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, I have yet to bring this up on the podcast. We know the Blackhawks officially will receive the 25th overall pick in the 2025 NHL Draft, stemming from the Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty trade a couple of years ago. That was a top 10 protected pick. Maple Leafs were not among the 10 worst teams in the NHL, so the Blackhawks are going to be receiving their first round selection, officially giving them the 3rd and 25th overall picks in the first round. 2 more top 25 selections in this year's NHL Draft, although I wouldn't be surprised to see KD package that 25th overall pick along with maybe a second-round selection or something to go in, move up in the top 20 and get a guy that he likes in particular. But there are my full thoughts on the Mitch Marner debate. Should he wind up hitting free agency? And again, at this point, all signs are pointing in that direction. Let me know in the comment section if you think the Blackhawks should go and make a run at Mitch Marner. Would it be a mistake for them to let him pass them by in free agency? Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, before I close out today's episode, still have to get into all the noteworthy takeaways from Jeff Blashill's introductory press conference. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. And a reminder for your second listen to go and check out our new Locked On NHL Game Night so that you can get local analysis on a national scale. And you can easily find Locked On NHL Game Night right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, Jeff Blashill was officially introduced as the new head coach for the Chicago Blackhawks down at Fifth Third Arena yesterday. So I wanted to make sure to get into all the noteworthy takeaways from that in terms of Blashill's philosophy, something he had to say on Connor Bedard. But first, we got a little bit of an update on the coaching staff. We know officially that Matthew Pekka and Anders Sorensen Sorensen will be returning. Pekka officially named to the coaching staff. That is officially official. Jimmy Waite, the Blackhawks' longtime goaltender coach who has been here since 2014, I believe. There was kind of, his status was up in the air, whether he was going to be remaining with the organization. We learned that he will officially be staying with the Blackhawks. And I think for Waite to have been here under 4 different head coaches now, I think that goes to show just how highly regarded the Blackhawks think of him. And also someone who's been around for Drew Commesso these last handful of years. I think you want to continue on that developmental path, as well as giving Spencer Knight some consistency here now that he's going to take over as the number 1 goaltender of the future. So I think it's probably a smart idea to keep Jimmy Waite around. The Blackhawks are also going to be keeping around video coaches Matt Meacham and Adam Gill, who I believe have done a really good job of the challenges these last couple of years. I think that was probably one of the better things under Luke Richardson's tenure was he was one of the most successful challenge coaches in the NHL. So I think it makes sense to keep Matt Meacham and Adam Gill, as they've both done a really good job in that department. But the most noteworthy takeaways that we got from Jeff Blashill, I believe, were about his coaching philosophies to give us a little bit of an idea of how he wants the team to operate under his leadership. First, what he had to say on this was, quote, "When you don't have the puck, we want to pressure and give the other team no space. If you can skate, you can do that. When you do have the puck, we want to play as fast as you can and be relentless in our attack. Again, if you can skate, you can do that." And obviously this is just a simple statement. I don't want to put too much weight into it, but combine what we heard here from Blashill in addition to what we've seen from his previous teams, as well as there was a really interesting video that's been shared on Blackhawks social media recently from the United States on YouTube, as Blashill has coached for the United States at the World Championships and been a coach for them several different times. He had a video where he shared some of his important philosophies and structures that he believes in on the ice. And in addition to hearing what Blashill had to say right here, I think it's easy to understand what he deems important from his team. And most importantly, what it seems like he wants to play with pace. And that aligns perfectly with what the Blackhawks have drafted under Kyle Davidson these last few years. And I think that's what makes this a real natural fit for Blashill. And that's something that he outlined here as well, in addition to him being just familiar with kind of that ground floor level, right? Not only with his time in Detroit with his first head coaching tenure, but also the Indiana Ice when he was not only a head coach, but a general manager there, Western Michigan, the Grand Rapids Griffins. Developmental level, growing things from the ground up and establishing a new culture, and that actually paid dividends at most of those places basically immediately, except for Detroit, where he wasn't necessarily set up for success. That was a team going through an aging roster and a very obviously kick the can down the road rebuild. So I think that's what naturally makes Jeff Blashill a really good fit here. But obviously with the Blackhawks having a lot of prospects who can play with pace, both in the forward group and on the defensive side of things, we know the Blackhawks, with the speed being as prevalent as it is in the NHL, they have to get faster, and we know that's a focal point for Kyle Davidson. Seems like that's a focal point for Jeff Blashill as well. That's music to my ears, as well as hearing that he loves to have a team that hounds the puck when they don't have it. This should be a Blackhawks team. They're built with two-way guys like Frank Nazar, like Oliver Moore, like Ryan Green, someone like Sasha Boisvert, who's going to be coming onto the scene in a couple of years. These are all two-way, AJ Spellisy, right? Like, these are two-way type of guys that can impact the game and hound the puck in order to get it back. And that certainly aligns with Jeff Blashill's philosophy. So definitely love to hear that, because I really believe that's how the modern game is played in the NHL. And then as well as this quote from Blashill, quote, "And then to get into more particulars, we have a lot of young D that are big, but can also skate. So how can we develop the right breakout plan to make sure we're utilizing our talents as best as possible?" And again, the blue line, Kyle Davidson has a lot of guys, not only that have size, which matches up with the modern day NHL, Most teams that make deep runs in the Stanley Cup playoffs have a lot of size on the back end. The Blackhawks have that in their prospect pool, and most of them can move pretty well in addition to that. And to hear Blashill talk about the breakout plan and with the speed that he likes to play with, I think we can expect the Blackhawks defensemen to be very active under Jeff Blashill, especially in the transition game. And that matches with a lot of these guys' styles. Kevin Korchinski, Sam Renzel, who can absolutely fly out there. Artem Levshinov loves to lug the mail up the ice, maybe even a little bit too much, but that's going to match really well with Jeff Blashill's philosophy. And then just in general, him talking about the breakout. I mean, how long has the Blackhawks breakout been an issue for? Far too long. In the transition style, again, speed is key in today's game. And that is at the forefront in the transition game as well as on the breakout. Love to hear Jeff Blashill address that in his introductory presser. Last quote that I wanted to bring up from this was Blashill's quote on Connor Bedard saying, quote, he wants Bedard to work on creating more scoring chances, creating more separation and space in the offensive zone, as well as winning habits like shorter shifts and stopping on pucks. And I think the latter part of that quote is just about fine-tuning his game and becoming a little bit more of a pro. I don't necessarily think Connor Bedard was put into the best place to receive constructive criticism the last year or so, right? Because of all the losing, because of the turnover with the coaching staff, because Anders Sorensen comes in and he's not someone who's very vocal or has a ton of experience. I think Bedard was allowed to get a little bit sloppy out there, and that's to be expected from a 19-year-old kid. But again, you definitely don't want it to turn into habits and those long shifts and just making the proper decisions on getting the puck in tight and making the correct back check. I love to hear Jeff Blashill address that, as well as Bedard needing to play with the puck and creating more space for himself in the offensive zone. And what's one way that Mr. Bedard can do that? It's by getting faster and working on his skating, creating more separation from a skating and speed gap from his opponents, as well as I think working on his edge work and just being more shifty and elusive, those starts and stops and those pivots in the O zone. Again, to just give yourself that extra quarter to half second to go and recognize a trailer that's joining in on the rush, or to see that open teammate cross ice and be able to get that puck over to him. Those are the things that Connor Bedard, I definitely agree, needs to work on. I thought Jeff Blashill had a lot of good quotes here in his introductory presser that aligns well with Kyle Davidson's vision of how he's built out this Blackhawks prospect pool the last couple of years. I was pretty excited with what I had to hear from Jeff Blashill. Let me know in the comment section below if you felt the same way, Blackhawks fans. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Again, thank you all, as always, for joining me on the show. Reminder to hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't done so already, and to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you can catch the show on your lunch break, to or from work, on your commutes, whatever it may be. It's all 100% free. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman 2. My Strictly Blackhawks account is at Talkin' Hockey, and that way you won't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. But until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.